Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to another true crime video with me, Paige Speaks, and welcome back to another Saturday. How was you guys this week? My week, you can tell by my nails how my week went. I lost several nails. I lost several nails. This one is scratched. You know what, you guys? Stick-on nails are the real truth. Look at that. Look how those nails look. I don't know if it can focus, but they're the real truth. Anywho's, I don't want to talk too much, as I usually say in the beginning of these videos, because I know a lot of you are usually like, girl, we don't care when you're kulienda during your week. Nobody gives a damn. But anywho, guys, I hope you had a good week. I had a hectic week. It was a bit hectic, but we thank God that we've made it to Saturday. Tomorrow is Sunday. Go to church, pray, do what you need to do to reset your day, you reset yourself, and try it again on Monday. Anywho, guys, so for today's case, we are going to be talking about the Stephen Achia Ichakara case. It's actually a case from a long time ago, so I will say that there was like not so many sources. Actually, a lot of the things that I got were from the Court of Appeal documents. Like, they made an appeal later, and I got a lot of it from there, but there was like so many. The recording was just not good. Even like in the Court of Appeal document, I will say like some of the dates contradicted, and I was like, side eye, bombastic side eye. But I just want to let you guys know that, because I don't want to be the one who is being told, oh, Paige, you did it, I didn't do. Woman is scared, you man is scared. Anywho, guys, that is what I just wanted to say, but I will link all the sources, as I usually do, down below in the description box. I would also like to put out a few disclaimers before we enter today's case. The first disclaimer that I want to put out is, obviously, we are going to be talking about murder. So if you can't really handle that, please, then I don't think this is the space for you. The second thing I would also like to disclaim is we're going to be talking about the use of blunt force, like blunt objects to cause blunt force trauma. So if you do have, like, if that's a trigger for you, I would advise you to leave now. Also, I would also like to disclaim the fact that I genuinely and truly do not mean any disrespect to anybody that I talk about in this video. Everything that I say in this video is gotten from sources like I told you guys. And yeah, without further ado, let us hop right into... Oh, I also forgot one last disclaimer. Sorry. We're also going to be talking about politics. Not too much politics. Like, I'm not going to be talking about this political party. No. But the person we're talking about had a lot to do with politics. He was a politician. So if you can't handle that, I don't want to hear you're supporting this person. I'm not doing anything. Do I look like a campaign manager? Huh? Unity to Kenya, Masai Mara. Everybody, one power, Ubuntu. Anyway, guys, without further ado, let us hop right into today's case. Sorry, I just had to step out to do my eyebrows, but let's get right into it. So, who is Mr. Stephen Ichakara? I will be calling him Ichakara throughout the entirety of this video, because I have an uncle called Stephen, and I don't know, like, you know that thing when you just don't want to, like, bring the whole death thing on somebody that's actually alive? So I'm just gonna call him Ichakara, because I don't want to be thinking about my uncle. Anyways, let's move on. Stephen Achia Ichakara was born in the year 1946 in a small village in Teso. I'll put down below here, like, which exact region Teso is in, because I forgot to write that in. But that is where he was born. Now, I couldn't find exact details as to how many people were in his family, but what I could find out about his family is that Ichakara had a brother by the name of Manasseh, who seems to be still alive, as far as the sources I was using could tell. Don't hold me to that now. But as far as, like, what I could tell, he seems to be still alive, because he was in the interviews that, like, people, when people were asking him about his brothers. He also came from a home that had more than one wife, so his mother was not the only wife to his father. He came from a home where he had a stepmother by the name of Angela, and Angela is actually the one who ended up raising Ichakara. There wasn't much said about what happened to his mother and exactly why she wasn't able to raise Ichakara, but from what was said, his stepmother Angela was the one who ended up raising him. Now, Angela says that Ichakara was a very obedient young man. She says that when his mother was actually alive, they were very close, and he was, like, always at the feet of his mother. It sounds so sad, because, like, I'd really like to know what happened. Cause shame. That sounds really, really sad. Anywho's, Angela says that Ichakara was a very, very good boy. She says he was very obedient, and he was also very, very good in terms of school. She also describes him as being someone who is very good at like using his hands. She said he would build like a lot of like DIY stuff in the home, and that when he was like really, really young, he actually built them a food cart. And from what she was like, from the excitement she had when she said that he built them a food cart, I think having a food cart back in the day was like a big, a big deal. I mean, right now I can't think in my apartment to have a food cart because like, who is even eating from a food cart? You know what I mean? But she seemed so excited, which made me like happy for her. You know, when you're just like, I don't get the flex, but I'm happy that you do. Anywho's, she says that as Ichakara was growing up, he developed a serious love for learning. Like I said, his grades were really, really good. He had the best grades throughout his primary education, and also when he got into high school, he was really, really good. In fact, he was so good that when he graduated from high school, he actually secured himself a place at Makerere University. So here is this small young boy who has gone from a village in Teso, and now he's on his way to Makerere University. And let me tell you something. During this time, Makerere University was the creme de la creme of higher education in Eastern Africa. I don't know if it still is today, but from what I hear, it actually still is very, very good of an institution if you want to like go for higher learning. And back then, like a lot of leaders used to go to either like Makerere, or which one is the one in Ghana? Kwame Nkrumah. So he was going to like a really good university at his young age. Ichakara would graduate from the university, and after graduation, he actually came back home to his village in Teso before he so that he can like gauge exactly what he wanted to do with himself, etc. Now, it said as he came back home to his village, he really realized that he was in a position to help. He was an educated young man who understood politics, number one, and not only did he understand politics, he also understood the locals in his community. So he felt compelled to come back home and help the people back in Teso. Now, due to this love of his community and wanting to help people, Ichakara would finally decide to join politics, or like start a career in politics, so that he could be able to help the people that are in his community. Now, this decision would lead Ichakara to become more involved in the community, get to know the people in the community better, reach out, get to know exactly which issues the people in the community were having. Ichakara would get himself so well immersed with the community, but the problem still remained that he didn't have any political connections, he didn't have any like political affiliations. Remember, he was a small boy from this village in Teso, and yes, he's gone to Makerere University, but it wasn't in Kenya. Like, he didn't know anybody that could help him get that foot through the door. So in so much as he has all this support back home and all these people in his community who are like, wow, we love you, whatever, he didn't have the political connections that he needed to get. And I'll tell you now, the political connections he needed would have been very relevant to go up against the guy who was actually the member of parliament or the representative for that area in Teso. Now, the person who he was going to be going up against, his opponent, was a man by the name of Frederick Oduya Opong. Now, a bit about Frederick. Frederick sadly actually passed away recently in 2019. God rest his soul. And quickly before we get into who he was, I found out that he actually lost his life to a bullet that had been lodged in his brain for the past 20 years. So I just wanted to just let you guys know that, gosh, imagine living your whole life with a bullet in your brain. Where Ionikali? But anyway, Frederick was basically like the representative or the member of parliament for that area, and he was a big guy. Like, he was a big guy. He was one of the people who actually helped alongside Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. He was actually one of the people who fought for Jomo Kenyatta to be released from wherever they were holding him, child, because it was, every time I check where they were holding him, it's always like a different response. But wherever they were holding him, they were actually the people who fought for his release. Like, during around that time, Kenya was getting its independence. Now, after independence, Frederick was actually appointed as the member of parliament for the Busia North constituency, which is the constituency that Ichakara was actually coming from, and the constituency that Mr. Ichakara wanted to be the representative of. Frederick Oprong also, after independence, was a trade unionist, and he had founded the Kenya Quarry and Mines Workers Unit. And yeah, he was the Minister of Labor at a point. Like, he just was the political guy. In terms of political adversaries, this is not the guy you want to be going up against. But here comes Mr. Ichakara, and he's like, I can do it. Why can't I do it? Now, step one, he had to first get the community on his side. Like I said, he was very, very involved with the community. He spoke to people. He knew the people's problems. He knew what was going on with the people in the Busia constituency. However, like I said, he didn't have the political connections that he needed to be able to go up against this powerful, basic political veteran of this country. Now, what did he do? In order to get the experience, one, and to also get the connections that he would have needed for such a position, Mr. Chakara decides to take up a position with the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, this position that he took up would have him traveling a lot, I will say. And in 1972, during one of his travels working for the ministry, he would travel to Nakuru, where he met a woman by the name of Grace. Now, Grace was a medical student at the University of Nairobi, but she was working like part-time with the Ministry of Agriculture as well. And I'm confused. Let me not say I'm confused. Maybe it's because I'm not working in those sectors, so I don't know how agriculture and medicine, but they could very much get together. Page sasa unasema nini? Yeah, those two sectors could go together. Anyways, Grace and Ichakara met in 1972 as both of them are working. And Grace says that when she met Ichakara, he had just graduated from a career. So to her, he was like a young guy, yes. But remember, she's a university student still. So there was also this whole thing like, yes, he's just graduated, but he's a graduate, I'm not. So there was this mesmerization. I will say that's what I got from how she was talking about him. She was very mesmerized with him. She actually describes him as attractive, loving, and educated. And she fell for him. God, somebody's out there actually describing me like that. Period. Find yourself a boo. Find yourself a boo, baby. Watu wanapendwa. Wewe tu ndio hapo una post unasema utaki mapenzi. Anyway, so Grace and Ichakara got in touch, kept on talking, and the two of them quickly fell for each other. The two of them would later get married. However, I couldn't find the date that they actually got married, but I do know that the two of them did eventually end up getting married. Now, in the duration of their marriage, they would go on to have 5 children. I am unsure which children these were. I tried to find it online, but I wasn't finding 5. I was finding like some. I'll just tell you that they had 5 children during the duration of their marriage. Now, according to Grace, their marriage was very healthy. They were very in love with each other. Ichakara was actually a very calm man, according to what Grace said, and he was also not like the other men during that time. She says Ichakara was very much a man who would go to like the soko and buy everything like they needed in the house. And during this time, it wasn't common to just be seeing guys going to the sokos to buy things, buying stuff for their families, But Ichakara was that guy. Now, the support that Ichakara was giving his wife, basically in helping her in the house and everything, allowed her to actually be able to have enough time to do other things for herself. Grace would actually graduate, and after graduating, she would set up her own tiny, is it tiny? I don't want to say tiny, but her own small medical facility, from what they said. I guess she set up a clinic, because they didn't say pharmacy, so they said medical facility. So I'm assuming that's probably a clinic. Anywho's, as Grace was setting up her medical clinic, Ichakara would set up an office in town where he could actually meet people, because like I told you guys, he used to love meeting the people of the village, of the constituency, and talking to them and hearing about their issues. So this office would help him be able to be, number one, in a central place, and number two, people didn't have to come all the way to his house if they wanted to have a conversation with him. Now, Ichakara's hard work politically in terms of getting to talk to people, knowing the people's issues, as well as in addition to getting the actual work experience and doing the groundwork for political aspirations, finally paid off, because in 1979, at the young age of 33, he was actually able to win out Frederick Oprong as being the MP of the Busia constituency. Now, Ichakara would prove himself once again when he was re-elected in 1983 to be the MP of the constituency yet again. Now, this time round, because of the successes he had seen, he was actually appointed the finance assistant minister, and he was well on his way to becoming somebody very, very powerful, or somebody very, very influential in the government. Now, for the 8 years that he served, the people of his constituency said that Ichakara was just that guy. They said he was very compassionate, he listened, and he was very attentive to the people. The people loved him. On top of that, he was credited for a lot of developmental projects in the area, and he really encouraged education as being this beacon of hope for the young children of the constituency. Now, his stepmother would say during this time he didn't forget his family. Apparently his first paycheck, he actually used it to buy clothes for the women of his family, and he used it to keep them in style, honey. And that was so sweet, because you guys, this lady was just so energetic when she was talking about Ichakara. And it's wow, she really, that's so, imagine somebody, their first paycheck, they're using it to buy you clothes. That's just so sweet, please. Now, Ichakara's future was flourishing. He was loved by the people. He had a good heart. He was just that guy. Everybody around him kept on saying he has a bright future. He is the guy that we want to go on ahead. Now, the bright future that Ichakara had only made the devastating events that took place on the 26th of January in 1987 even more hurtful, more sad, more down, making you feel even more depressed as to what happened. Sadly, on the 26th of January 1987, Mr. Ichakara would end up passing on. Now, you're obviously wondering exactly what had happened. He was a very young, healthy man. He was energetic. He had love. He had the family unit support. He had all the things that you would think someone needs to be able to live this long, healthy life. And that is true, because his death was actually not caused by any natural cause, but it was caused by the events that took place 10 days earlier on the 15th of January 1987. So what happened on the 15th of January? On the afternoon of the 15th of January, a woman by the name of Margaret Namwaki Musungu would come over to visit Ichakara. Now, Margaret would actually come over with her friend who was in need of a job. Now, according to what Margaret says, Margaret had migrated from Uganda to Kenya 4 years earlier. And she says she was really worried about work, employment, etc. But apparently Ichakara took Margaret under his wing, being the amazing man that he was, and he helped Margaret be able to find herself a job and settle down in Kenya. Now, although Margaret had a job, like I said, she was looking for a job for her friend, so she probably thought, you know what, if Ichakara helped me get a job, then he's obviously in a good position to help Miss Mams get a job. So she heads over to her with her friend on the 15th of January to visit Ichakara. Now, although the relationship between Ichakara and Margaret was founded on him basically helping her get a job, the two of them actually had a friendship outside of this. Apparently, Ichakara would actually visit Margaret's house a lot, considering the fact that his nephew lived in Margaret's servants' quarters. So the two of them were very good friends, which explains the reason behind why she would think, yeah, I'm gonna go and visit Ichakara to help my friend be able to get this job. Now, Margaret goes to visit Ichakara on the afternoon of the 15th, and after this, the two of them would leave Ichakara's home. Now, Margaret would go home. However, later on the evening of the 15th, Margaret would decide to go and visit her husband's brother who lived in Ngumo Estate. Now, I will disclaim here that some sources said that she was going back to her house from her brother-in-law's house, and then some say that she was making her way from her house to her brother-in-law's house. So you can decide what she was doing, but basically she was making her way to this terminal. That's all I'm gonna tell you. Now, as Margaret is waiting for a bus, she quickly realizes that a bus wasn't gonna come, honey, because it was late. I'm guessing during those days, buses didn't used to move around. I don't know, honey, but from what she was saying, there was no bus coming for her at 7 p.m. in the night, which is where? So Margaret realizes she's not going to get a bus and she decides to start walking. Now during this walk, she would come across Ichakara, who was actually in his car making his way to the grounds at Carnivore because he had a meeting. Now he tells her that, hey, I can drop you home, but you need to wait for me to finish my meeting at Carnivore because I'm already late. So I'm gonna go with you to Carnivore grounds and then we can have dinner and do whatever I'm doing and then I'll drop you back home. Now Margaret says she agreed to this because it's like, first of all, honey, you're not gonna get a car. Like, what do you really have to lose? So Margaret says she agrees to this and the both of them make their way to Carnivore grounds. Margaret says that as they got to the signage board at the Carnivore, like of the Carnivore grounds, 3 or 4 gangsters would like jump out of nowhere in front to the front of the car. So they jumped out and they're standing in the front of the car. Now I say 3 to 4 gangsters because Margaret says she wasn't sure because it was really dark at this point, but she says like 3 to 4 men jump out of, you know, God knows where, and they're basically standing in front of the car. She says that 2 of them were at the front of the car and then 2 of them actually came in through the sides of the car, if you get what I mean. So there's the 3 to 4 gangsters, they've all come out, they've jumped out in front of the car, right? 2 of them remain in the front and then the other 2 come to the sides. Now one of them enters on the side of Margaret while the other enters on the side that Ichakara was seated on. Now as these guys enter, they're basically threatening them from the back for them to remain calm, not to do anything, not to try anything fishy. At this point, one of the guys who, like one of the gangsters who was standing in front of the car, actually makes his way to the side of Ichakara. So the guy makes his way to Ichakara's like window side and he basically leans in through the window and he starts talking to Ichakara. Now Margaret says this particular guy was wearing a greenish blackish t-shirt alongside a woolen hoodie. So come on, Boshori. I think that's what they were trying to say. I genuinely think they were trying to say Mboshori, but they were like a woolen type cap. And I was like, Mboshori. Margaret says Ichakara would obviously ask the men, like, what do you want? Tell me what you want. We can talk about this, etc. But the people who were there for them basically didn't say a goddamn thing. The guy who was leaning on the side of Ichakara's window literally tells Ichakara to start driving off of like the road to a more secluded area. He tells Ichakara to drive off to a more secluded area. And the more like and when he says this, Ichakara obviously is like, okay, but what do you want? Like, can you tell me what you want? And as soon as he realizes Ichakara isn't gonna do this without like being, you know, forced into submission, he now takes control of the steering wheel and he begins like steering the car so that like basically forcing Ichakara to comply with this demand. All of them make their way off of the like the road where people can be able to see them to like the back road of the Wilson Airport. I don't know how this works because Sijai Kwa Wilson Airport, but I'm trying to think like they went to the back of Wilson. I don't know. For you guys who have been to Wilson Airport, tell me if this is like how this would work. I don't know how this would work. I would expect that Wilson Airport would be like gated, no? Because like it's planes, right? But anywho's, Margaret says they are forced off of the road and they're forced to the back of the Wilson Airport road. As soon as they got to the back of this road, Margaret says that the guy who was on Ichakara's side basically yanks Ichakara out of the car and he literally begins violently attacking Ichakara. Ichakara is screaming to him, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Like, we can talk about this, you don't have to do this. And Ichakara is basically trying to plead for not only his life, and this is the beautiful thing about this man, not only is he pleading for his life, but he's also alongside that pleading for Margaret's life. Now, as all of this is going on, Margaret is left in the car with the 2 men who had entered, remember, in the back of the car. So there was the 2 men who entered in the back, and then there was the other guys who were at the who were outside, right? So now one of these guys has pulled Ichakara out of the car. So 2 of the men who were in the car are now left in the car with Margaret. Margaret says that these men now proceed to literally try and assault her. She says she was also trying to ask them like, what's up? What do you want from us? But these men literally, according to Margaret, they weren't there for robbing. Like, they didn't seem like they wanted anything. This was just like brute force violence for just the sake of brute force violence. You know what I mean? So Margaret says she tries to ask them what they want, and these men literally just wanted to rape her. Like, that's what Margaret says. She said that she's trying to have a conversation with these guys, and these guys are not even interested in hearing anything she has to say. They don't want anything from her, and they just basically jump on Margaret trying to rape her. Now, Margaret was sitting in the front, so she was able to like basically kick the guys. So basically she had like some leeway to fight against these men. Now, because of how ferociously Margaret was fighting these men, she says one of them actually gave up and he left the car and went to join the other one who was actually beating up Ichakara. Now, she says that she was left with the other one in the car basically, and this other one, she says this other guy was not willing to give up. She says this other guy was very much so determined to do something to her, and so when she's left with this other guy, he also gets out of the car, but unlike the other guy who went to like basically join his cohort to be beating up an innocent man, this other guy now goes to her side of the car and yanks her out and basically gets her on the ground so that she doesn't have like the advantage of being in the front seat and being able to fend for herself and fight him off. Now, Margaret says that as soon as the two of them got out of the car, the guy would first get her watch from her. So he took her watch from her, and then after that he now proceeded to continue to finish off what he had started in the car, which is try to rape Margaret. Margaret says she really, buckled down and fought this guy, but she says like he grabbed her by the neck and began strangling her, and she basically couldn't breathe. Now, as he's strangling her, Margaret says she managed to like get free, and she also managed to start fighting him back. But she does also say that he grabbed her hair, like he grabbed her braided hair and he ripped it out of her skull because she's like fighting, trying to run away. So he's like, and he rips out her hair from her scalp. But Margaret says even at that, she didn't give up and she continues to fight him. As they're fighting, the two of them would fall to the ground. Now, at this point, the man was able to get Margaret's panties off. However, according to Margaret, he wasn't like successful in the attempts to rape her. So he was able to get the panties off of her, but he wasn't successful in his attempts at rape. Margaret says that as they were fighting, he's gotten her panties off. She was able to then get on top of him, and she was now on top of him, basically in control, let's say, of the situation, but he was still holding and choking her. Now, she says at this point, the men who had been attacking Ichakara entered the car and began like hooting and calling out to the guy that she was having this whole tussle with. The guy throws Margaret off of him, and he now runs over to his mates, and they make their getaway in Mr. Ichakara's car. Now, Margaret says as the men left, she made her way to Ichakara. Now, she didn't say that she was going off of the screaming pains, but she says like she could hear him, like where he was, based off of like the way he was screaming. And she says the most heartbreaking thing. And she says that she was like going towards him, and all she could hear was like him screaming out for his wife. You guys, my voice even broke because that one is so painful. And what's even more painful is that in later interviews, his wife said that she had actually called him like that evening, telling him that he shouldn't be late and like he should start getting home because dinner was ready and she didn't want it to get cold. So Margaret manages to find Ichakara, and he's in a really bad way. The men had used like according to some sources, machetes and like sticks beat him up, and he was like basically almost unconscious. He was wailing in pains, and so Margaret basically had to really think quick because this man he's in a bad way, we need help. Margaret thinks and decides that they were going to continue their way to the carnivore grounds because that's where they were probably going to, they had a higher possibility of being helped there as opposed to like in the middle of a remote, segregated, secluded road. Margaret says she basically helps up Ichakara, and she literally goes with him to the restaurant at Carnivore that Ichakara had been going to initially. Now, Margaret says that as they got to basically the Carnivore hotel, the security guard would help her basically with Ichakara, like helping her basically carry him. So the two of them would get help, and they also were able to talk to a man by the name of Mr. Josephat Angoli. Now, he was the assistant manager at the Carnivore Hotel, and he basically asked Margaret like how far, like what happened, like what happened here, what's going on. Now, this is where Margaret really to the general public at this point, like during this time, looked a bit suspect, because when Mr. Angoli asked Margaret, like, what happened, Margaret actually kind of like fibbed a bit. Now, she didn't fib or she didn't lie about the events of the night. She didn't lie that, okay, we were attacked and everything. She didn't lie, but about the sequence of events, but she did lie about who she was. Now, Margaret was asked who she was, and she gave a fake name to Mr. Angoli. And on top of giving a fake name, she was very like reluctant to go with the two of them to like the hospital. She was also like very reluctant to like get anyone else's help. Like she seemed like very hands-offish from this whole scenario. She was just like, Mr. Story mingi, like, like she was very like Mr. Story mingi, like nimefikisha hapa, wacha tu ishi hapa. You get what I mean? And this was giving a bit side eye, especially because Margaret didn't even go the extra mile to like try and call Mr. Ichakara's family. Like, you would expect that being so close with Mr. Ichakara would go the extra mile, at least to call Ichakara's wife or one of Ichakara's family members, to let them know, hey, this is something terrible that's happened, especially like now you have access to a phone. She didn't call the cops, like, no. And she also didn't call his wife, and she was the one person who witnessed this whole thing go down. Now, on top of that, she also said that she had seen 5 gangsters at this point instead of the 3 to 4, which she would later get into. That's why I've been saying 3 to 4, because that was what was generally accepted. But at this point, she would say 5. Now, I will say that maybe she was shocked. Like, maybe at this point she was just so shocked. Maybe I'm just trying to think why she wouldn't want her name to be mentioned. Like, I don't know. Comment down below, why do you think she didn't want her name to be mentioned? Now, Ichakara would eventually be taken to the hospital in the car of the assistant hotel manager, and he would actually go, and they would actually go with Margaret. But Margaret, like I said, she really didn't want much to do with this situation. So even at the hospital, she was very much keeping a whole hands-off kind of approach to this whole thing. Margaret basically dropped off Ichakara and she left. No police report, no nothing. Now, like I said, Ichakara had very much so risen in the political ranks. So when news got around that one of the political elites had been touched, it became a big thing. And during this time, it was like the ruling party was KANU. And, like I said, it was going to get a bit political, but not too political. But I wasn't alive, so I'm just going off of what people have told me. During this time, things were a bit hectic. Like, you couldn't just go around killing people in Kenya, especially like members of bloody parliament that were a part of KANU, because KANU was a very like powerful and quote unquote, some would argue very like over the top, let's call it, regime. Like, they were very like over the top. I will say that. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I wasn't born then. Sikua, okay? But that's what I've heard. So when it got to the government that this is what happened to one of their own, there was like serious crackdown. Like, the government was like, we need to find who did this, and we need to find them yesterday, not even today. We should have even found them before this happened. The government puts a lot of pressure on the police to be able to locate exactly what happened to Mr. Ichakara and like exactly who did what they did. And this is where the search for the assailants begin. Now, the police had nowhere to start. Like I told you guys, Margaret didn't make any police report. On top of not making any police report, she lied to Mr. Angoli, the assistant manager. She lied about her name. So the police are literally looking for this mystery woman that was present during this attack, and they don't even know where to start because they don't even have a name. And remember, back then, hata hakuna Facebook, hakuna Instagram, like 1987. Do you get what I mean? Like, it was so difficult to tell who this man could have met. There's no CCTV. So police are just starting on a blank slate. Now, this would go on until when Mr. Ichakara's wife, Grace, actually went to his office. Now, I don't know if she was clearing his stuff out. I don't know what she was doing in the office, but she said she was looking through his things, like looking through his documents. And it's as she's looking through his documents that she finds a complimentary slip with the name Margaret Musungu from like a particular hotel. Now, I googled what I googled what a complimentary slip is, and turns out a complimentary slip is used by businesses as a means of improving relationships with customers and clients. So Grace finds this document and she feels maybe the police might, benefit from it. So she takes this to the police station. Now, the police, obviously having nothing nothing else to go off of, they're just like, fine, we'll contact this lady and see what she knows. Now, Ichakara is reported to have died of excessive loss of blood. He also suffered a brain hemorrhage and fractures to the skull and his hands as well, because they were beating him with, like, vitu zenye hazina, like they don't have a spike, so they can't pierce the skin, but they can break things on you. So Ichakara was taken to the Nairobi hospital, and he did undergo 3 major surgeries, but his body sadly gave out because of the severity of the injuries that he had sustained during this entire attack. Now, police would finally locate Miss Margaret. Now, sadly, Ichakara would die at the age of 41 years old. A man with a bright future, a man with a loving family, a loving community, and nothing but love in his heart. His wife and his children speak highly of him, and so do members of his community. Now, Ichakara's death really increased the pressure that law enforcement was facing, not only from the government now, but also from the local community in Busia, and also from the community, from the country at large, to find the killers of this good man. Now, at this point, police were trying to still locate Margaret, and finally, a few days after, they were able to locate her. Now, police say that when they arrested, or well, brought her in for questioning, let me not say arrested, because remember, they don't know that she's the mystery lady. You get, they're looking for her, thinking she might be the mystery lady. But police say that when they brought Miss Madame in, she was actually very cooperative. Like, she wasn't somebody who was like, I'm not talking, get me my lawyer. No. She was very cooperative, according to what police would say. Apparently, she actually told the police that the reason she didn't even come forth in the first place was because Ichakara, on their way to the carnivore restaurant for them to get help, he actually allegedly, according to Margaret, told her that she should not contact the police, and that she should not actually contact anybody, not his wife, not anybody. She says that he told her this because he didn't want her getting like in trouble with law enforcement and stuff, and she says he said to her that he was going to handle his own business. Now, she says that he was very, very adamant that she should keep a low profile in this whole matter. And she says this is the reason she gave the false name to Mr. Angoli when he asked her what's up. She says this is also why she didn't come to report the incident. And she was just like, she didn't think that, she genuinely believed that he was going to recover and get back on his feet and find the people who did this to him. But according to, basically the gist of her general story is, I didn't come forward because he told me not to come forward, and he said he was going to handle his own stuff. So I just didn't want to get involved, and I decided to be quiet. Now, police were very, very suspicious of Miss Margaret for the following reasons. Number one, they didn't believe the story that the two of them were just friends. They would make the point that, like, why would he first have to go all the way to Carnivore, have his dinner, and then come home with you? Like, why didn't he just drop you off? So they kind of suspected, especially considering the fact that she said they had a very, close relationship, like close friendship, to the point where he got her a job and stuff. They kind of thought maybe something more, intimate was going on between the two of them. But Margaret maintained that they were just friends. Nothing like that ever happened. Nothing like that ever took place. On top of that, police were also very wary and suspicious of her, because it's just like, what are you saying? Like, this guy tells you not to say anything. Like, shouldn't you have said something? Like, this is something serious that probably anyone would have been like, maybe I should go to the police about this. On top of that, she as well lied to the people at the hotel. And it's like, why would you lie? Like, the police just weren't believing Margaret. Now, on top of all of this, Margaret also would give a contradictory confession to what she said to Mr. Angoli literally minutes after the attack. Margaret said to the police that there were 3 to 4 gangsters. However, to Mr. Angoli, she said there were 5 gangsters, which cast even more doubt. In addition to the events timeline that Margaret gave, Margaret also gave a brief description of the suspects, like the assailants. She tells the police that the guy who attacked her herself was a dark man who was skinny and shaggy, who was also missing like teeth from like his upper jawline. And he was wearing a red t-shirt on that night. And then she tells police that the guy who attacked Mr. Ichakara was wearing a blue-green t-shirt with the woolen hat, Naboshori. Remember that guy? Yeah. So she tells police these descriptions. However, police were very like, reluctant to take her word for it because number one, she has proven to lie before, and number two, there were arguments that it was a very dark night. Like, how could you have been able to see these people and make them out? Maybe the attacker who attacked her and was trying to take advantage of her, maybe she was able to see him because remember, at a point she was on top of him, so that would have allowed her to see him under moonlight and also from the headlights of the car. And also remember, they were close to Wilson Airport, so they could have been able to use the lights surrounding them to see, but it was still very dark for her to have probably been able to see the guy on the other side beating up Ichakara. Do you get? So these are like the questions police are trying to piece together and they're trying to ask. But Margaret maintains that she saw what she saw and she knows what she saw. Now, the issue of the light was a really, really big issue. Like, it was so big to the point where I actually got someone who worked at Wilson Airport to discuss, like, the illumination of the lights, how far away, the distance you can see with the lights. And the guy from Wilson Airport says, like, judging from where the car was positioned, according to what Margaret says, they could have been able to see, like, 4 meters, up to 4 meters away, but nothing past that. And it's not 100% that they could have been able to 100% certify that this is who they saw. In addition to that, they also got people to literally reenact the entire crime scene, and they like put on all the lights and the possibilities and calculated even like the illumination of the moon. They were like, if the moon was here, then I was like, where? After she gave her testimony, is it testimony? Statement, right? After she made her statement, they would actually make an arrest. Now, according to sources, only 2 days after Margaret had given the police her statement, they actually made an arrest. Now, it's unclear exactly how they brought this man in, but they brought a man by the name of Gibson Njao Gitara in. It's important to note that Gibson was actually wearing a red shirt when he was arrested. And remember, Margaret had actually said that the man who attacked her while they were outside of the car and wanted to take advantage of her was wearing a red shirt. Gibson also fit the physical description that Margaret had given of the man. He had a very slim physique. His hair was quite shaggy, as per Margaret's saying. He was of a darker complexion, and most importantly to this case, he had missing teeth, or like a gap in his teeth that made it look like he had missing teeth. Which remember, Margaret had said the man who attacked her had a gap in his teeth that made it look like he had missing teeth, or he had missing teeth altogether. Now, the police would contact Margaret so she can actually come and identify Gibson. And right before Gibson was actually supposed to go for the identification, he would ask for a change of his shirt from a red one. He also asked for shoes, and he also asked the police to include more people in the lineup. So it's like it's not just him. I think maybe he thought it would just be him, but this is what he asked. And when he met Margaret, literally as soon as she walks in, she walks right up to Gibson and she asks him to open his mouth. When Gibson opens his mouth, everyone else is also told to open their mouth, the people in the police lineup, and they open their mouths. And Margaret says that this is exactly the man who attacked her on the night of the 15th of January. Now, with Gibson arrested, police were now trying to find the other members of this gang that had attacked Margaret and Ichakara. Now, remember the fact that I told you the assailants made away with the car that Mr. Ichakara had actually, been using on that specific evening? Yeah. So the police had managed to get the registration number of the car, and they had been tracking down, or like, I don't think during this time you could like do actual electronic tracking. So they had like basically been having their eyes on the lookout for this car, and they had told the general public, if you see anyone with this car is a robbed car. You get the whole thing trying to locate this car. Now, I will say that this area of the arrest, like how they arrested, and this area was a bit jumbled up because, like I said, I only could find like very limited resources because it's such an old case. But I will tell you like what I could gather from all of the information and the sources that I was able to see. Now, the car was found alongside a man who was actually on the police's radar, who had been on the police's radar for some time. And his name was actually Peter Kamande. Now, Peter would be caught wearing a green shirt with a black shirt under the green shirt. So he had the green shirt on top and the black shirt underneath. Now, remember when Margaret said one of the men was wearing a greenish t-shirt? Yep, he was wearing a greenish t-shirt. I'm not gonna lie, a greenish blackish t-shirt. Margaret's description kind of floats, kind of fits. Peter is brought in, and Peter denies all these allegations. He said he's never seen this woman in his life. Peter would ask for a change of shirt right before Margaret was brought in for the whole suspect lineup. Peter actually asked for this shirt from another like inmate, and the inmate took his green shirt, and he took another colored shirt from the inmate, and that's what he was wearing when Miss Margaret came in. Now, this part for Peter is very important to note because it will be very important in the future. As Margaret is brought in to identify whether Peter or not is the guy who assailed, Margaret basically, goes kind of limp, kind of numb at this point, and she's like looking around and she doesn't move for some time. She tries to find exactly who did it, but she turns around and she tells police she can't find, she doesn't know who he is, she doesn't know who it is. Now, she would try again, and it's when she tried again that she walks up to Mr. Peter, and she's just like, it could be him, but I would have to touch him to know. She gets permission to touch Peter and basically feel him to see if he was the man from that particular night. Because according to what she said, there's a point that they had come into physical contact. So she says she would be able to identify him from physical contact. Anywho, she's allowed to touch Mr. Peter, and it's upon touching Mr. Peter that she turns to police and she's like, yeah, this is the guy. Now, she touches Mr. Peter, but she's actually very hesitant as she's touching him. Like, before she said anything, she touches him, then like she waited a bit, and then she's just like, I don't know. So after she touches him and waits for some time, she finally turns to the police and she's just like, it's him. Yes, like according to how I'm feeling him, it's most likely him. She touched the other people and she still said it's most likely him, like according to how I'm feeling. But she was very much so keen on and adamant on telling the police that she can't be 100% sure that it is him, and say with 100% certainty, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it is him. Now, this would be very important for the trial, but I'm not going to get into it now. Now, both Peter and Gibson are taken into police custody, and they quickly begin to say that, it's not us, and they say that this is just like the police basically acting quickly to be able to find someone to arrest because of the pressure that the police were getting from the government and government officials. Now, because the two men are disagreeing or denying the fact that they did anything to Mr. Stephen, this obviously now has to go to trial. The case is taken to trial, and there were two main points of contention, and that is the identification of the witness, like Margaret's ability to identify the witnesses, and two, if the witnesses she did identify were actually the people. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's deal with the first one. Now, with regards to the identification of the witnesses, like I said, the issue of the lights was such a big issue, you guys. I've actually never seen lights be such a big issue in a case as it was in this one. The defense was arguing that how could she have seen, like how could she say without certainty that these were the people she saw? It was very dark. You couldn't have seen, particularly when it came to Peter, the guy who is alleged to have dragged out Mr. Ichakara from the car. The defense was arguing very much in Peter's favor that you could not have seen this man in this greenish shirt. You were literally on the other side, and then they pulled you out. Like, they were arguing that the light was too dim for her to have been able to identify Peter. With regards to the lights and Gibson, the defense basically let that one rest. Like, because she was on top of him at a point, and that pretty much sealed the whole, could she see him, could she not see him? So basically, the defense was very much arguing for the innocence of Mr. Peter more than Gibson, I would say, from what I could see. But remember, I don't have access to the actual trial files. I'm only looking at the Court of Appeal files. Like I also said, another point of contention was whether or not the people that she actually did identify were these actual people. Now, this particularly again was with regards to Mr. Peter Kamande. The defense was arguing that, okay, yes, he was caught in a green shirt, right? Right. He was caught in a green shirt. But number one, he was caught in a green shirt and he wasn't wearing like the Mboshori woolen cap that she claimed that he was wearing on the night of the attack. Second of all, the defense was also saying that like she was very hesitant to identify him as opposed to how quickly she was able to identify Mr. Gibson. Now, as the defense is arguing this, the prosecution would bring up the fact that the same type of green fibers that were found on Mr. Ichakara's backside, like his backside, were the same type of green fibers that were found on Mr. Peter's shirt. Like, they matched. They actually brought like a proper government fiber expert, like analyst, who had been in working in this field for 13 years, honey. And he said, yes, the same fibers were found on the backside of Mr. Ichakara. And the prosecution was like, okay, what if the guy from the hotel or the watchman who helped them, what if they had, put these green fibers there? And the expert of the fibers said, like, the way that the fibers were placed or where they were found could only mean that he was basically under like assault or being beaten or being malhandled for them to have ended up there. That is so interesting. Do you know, I didn't know that could happen, because he said like it's very unlikely because of the where these fibers were found. It's very, very unlikely that it was these people who are helping him, trying to help him. Anywho's, now the prosecution would also call into question the morality of Miss Margaret. Basically, like, they called into question the actual type of relationship she had with Mr. Ichakara. In addition to that, they also said like, oh, well, she lied in the beginning, so she could also be lying about the witnesses, etc., etc. But then the question now became like, what motive would she have to lie on these two here men? And the man's answer was like, oh, maybe it's because the government is pressuring, the police to find somebody to blame. So they're just looking for us, finding us and blaming us. Anywho's, at the end of this, the judge in this trial decided that, look, these two men are guilty, and he sentenced them to death by hanging. And they were now on death row. They were little prisoners on death row, both Peter Kimani and Gibson Jao. Now, all this would take place in 1987. And after the conviction of these guys, they didn't go silently into the night. No, honey. They were like, this is unfair. We're being targeted. They kept the argument up that, look, these guys are just arresting us because they've been told by the government, who during this time wasn't really a government to be trifling with. Like, you couldn't just play games with this government. Like, when they said something, you better follow. They were saying like they're scared of the government and what the government is going to do if they don't find someone, so they're just blaming us. We're just really good hard working men, and we're being blamed. Now, these men would eventually decide to appeal the decision that was made in 1987, and they would actually appeal it in 1989. So 87, 88, 89, only 2 years after they had been convicted. Now, they appealed on the following grounds. Number one, they appealed on the ground that Margaret was literally the only person who was relied upon to like give a witness identification or to identify the witnesses in this case, and that this identification couldn't be trusted because Margaret had already proven previous times to be a very untrustworthy person, because ergo she had lied, etc. And in addition, she never even went to the police in the first place. So the prosecution was the appeal was basically based off of the like morality aspect of her. Like, is she a credible witness? I was actually watching How to Get Away with Murder, and like one of the first things I know that's such a pathetic thing to reference, but like one of the first things they said is like, you have to discredit the witness. So this is like classic legal work. The second ground of appeal was the issue of the identification at the scene. So they were arguing that they couldn't be positively identified because of the lighting of how the scene looked. So this is the issue of the lights again. Honey, I told you they were even out here calculating what if the moon is at this, like they overdid with the lights. They really went all out with the lights. So for this to be brought up as another issue of contention or another point of contention again, interesting at best. Very, very interesting. You know what I mean? Anywho's, third, they also, it was actually 4 grounds of appeal, not 3. Third, they also agreed based off of the fact that the government analyst that was brought in during this trial to basically say whether or not the fibers that were found on Mr. Ichakara's clothing matched the fibers that were found on Mr. Kamande's shirt. Yeah, they said that no, like that guy, they appealed on the grounds that basically his stuff didn't make the sense. They were like, all he basically did was come and say like, this guy is the most probable person who touched this guy, but they didn't even investigate whether or not the people who brought him into the hospital were wearing green. They also didn't check if the nurses were wearing green. And they, in addition, said that they had actually asked this government analyst during the court trial, like during the actual trial, whether or not the people at Nairobi Hospital could have been the ones who put this on him. And apparently the expert had actually responded to them, and he was like, he's never seen nurses at the Nairobi hospital wearing green, like any green overalls or anything. And the appeal people were basically like, yeah, that's not enough. We need more evidence for you to be able to convict someone to hang. Like, you need way more evidence that it's not possible or it's improbable. Like, you need more evidence. The fourth ground of appeal was that the identification parades, like basically when Margaret came in to identify people, yeah, it wasn't conducted properly. I didn't see what they meant by that, because if anything, they conducted them really well, considering the fact that the people who were there to be checked on, they asked for changes of clothes and for other people to be added and all this, and they were granted that. So I was very much confused when they were like, the identification parades weren't conducted properly. Anywho's, the appeal decision would be given in Nairobi on the 5th of May in 1993. Now, the court allowed the appeal of Mr. Peter Kamande. So the man who was alleged to have pulled Mr. Peter out of the car, the one who was said to have been wearing the green shirt, and who all this government forensic stuff, all this work had gone into finding out if he was the guy. Yeah, his appeal was actually allowed and his conviction was quashed, and he was ordered to leave prison immediately. Like, with immediate effect, he was told he could leave. Now, irrespective of the fact that he was told he could leave, his co-appellant, Mr. Gibson, was not allowed to leave. The court was like, there was enough like proximity between him and Mrs. Margaret for her to be able to identify him properly. So the court held that he was going to have himself a merry good time in prison, and he was going to remain there for the events that took place on the 15th of January in 1987. Now, I couldn't find out what happened to Peter after he left, or even what happened to Mr. Gibson as he stayed in prison. Now, I did find out that Margaret is alleged to have moved back to Uganda. There was a lot of backlash against her after this case. Like, people, for one, didn't even believe that she was from Uganda. They actually called into question like where she was from. I even heard like this whole case caused like an issue between Kenya and Uganda. That's what I heard. Like, that's what I saw. I heard like it actually caused like diplomatic rifts between Kenya and Uganda. And I was like, damn. And it's alleged that she moved back to Uganda after this. I don't know if it's because of the backlash. I'm just saying this case did give her a lot of backlash. People were calling her an immoral woman. They were doubting the validity that, oh, we were just friends. They were saying like there was something more going on. In fact, even in the appeal, they actually brought up the kind of relationship that the two of them had. That was all I could actually find out about this case. Please let me know definitely, what do you think? What do you think that Margaret was telling the truth? Do you think that the police, their arrest of these two particular men was just part of this bigger conspiracy for them to just close this case up and be done with this case because they were facing so much pressure from the government? What do you think? Let me know down below in the comment section. And yeah, that has been it for me today, you guys. I genuinely hope that you learned something from this video, and I also hope that you can keep it respectful down below in the comment section. Like, don't start doing, this is why I hate this political party. This is not a political party channel. You can find many, by the way. If you do want to see more true crime from me, follow me on my TikTok at Paige Speaks, and you can also follow me on my Instagram, where I post, basically pictures of myself, and I do also post true crime videos. Yeah, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell so when I upload you can know. I will see you guys next week, same place, same time, Saturday. I'm going to stop saying at 7 p.m. because, do you know something? Hizi stima zitakuaibisha. Yeah, hizi steamer na hizi bundles, they're not at it for the weak-hearted. But yeah, I will see you guys next week, same place, same time. And I love you guys, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.